There is a player at almost every poker table who gets picked on. Not because they are the worst player in the room, not because they play too many hands or make obvious mistakes. They get picked on because they look like a target. They respond to aggression in predictable ways. They fold when they should fight. They fight when they should fold. And the best players at the table identify this within the first 3 orbits and spend the entire session extracting chips from that one person methodically and without mercy. If you have ever felt like the whole table was against you, like every bluff was aimed at you, like you could not catch a break no matter what you did, you were not unlucky. You were a target. And this video is going to change that permanently. Here is the truth that most poker training content will never say directly. Becoming a target is not about playing bad hands. It is about broadcasting information. Every time you fold to a 3-bet without thinking, every time you call a continuation bet and then give up on the turn, every time you check the river with a hand that could have bet for value, you are sending a message to every observant player at the table. And that message says, I am predictable. I am uncomfortable with aggression. I am safe to attack. The best players in the world are not reading your cards. They are reading your patterns. And patterns are far easier to read than cards. Sun Tzu wrote in The Art of War 2,500 years ago that the supreme art of war is to subdue the enemy without fighting. At the poker table, this translates perfectly. The most dangerous players are not the ones who bluff the most or bet the biggest. They are the ones who make themselves impossible to read, impossible to attack, and impossible to exploit. They are the ones who turn themselves from targets into threats. And that transformation does not require genius. It requires a system. And today, you are going to learn that system from the ground up. Stay with me, because what comes next is going to change every single session you play from this moment forward. Imagine you are walking through a city at night and you see 2 people ahead of you. One is walking slowly, head down, shoulders hunched, constantly looking over their shoulder. The other is walking with purpose, eyes forward, pace steady, aware of everything around them without showing anxiety. Which one looks like a target? The answer is obvious, and it has nothing to do with their size or strength or fighting ability. It is entirely about the signals they are broadcasting through their behavior. Poker works exactly the same way. There is a concept that elite players use called table image engineering. It is the deliberate construction of a specific perception in the minds of your opponents through the choices you make in the first 30 to 40 minutes of any session. Not the hands you win or lose, the way you carry yourself, the way you bet, the way you react when things go wrong, the speed of your decisions, the sizing of your bets. All of these things communicate information to every observant player at the table. And that information determines whether you are seen as a threat or as a resource. Research on behavioral pattern recognition shows that human brains form reliable impressions of others within the first 7 interactions in any competitive environment. At a poker table, 7 hands. That is all it takes for a competent player to build a working model of how you play. Which means that the first 7 hands you play in any session are not about winning or losing pots. They are about establishing the table image that will determine how opponents approach you for the next several hours. Here is what you want opponents to believe about you from the very beginning. You want them to believe that attacking you is expensive, that you are capable of fighting back in unexpected ways, that your ranges are wider than they look, that your folds are not guaranteed. You do not need to be the most aggressive player at the table to achieve this. You need to be the least predictable one. And predictability, unlike skill, is something you can change immediately, starting from your very next hand. Let me give you the first concrete system. It is the framework that elite players use to instantly categorize any aggressive opponent and select the correct counter strategy. Think of it like a map. When you enter unfamiliar territory, a map does not tell you what the territory will do. It tells you where you are, what your options are, and which path leads where you want to go. There are 4 types of aggressive players you will face at any poker table. Understanding which type you are dealing with changes everything about how you defend and counterattack. The first type is the frequency aggressor. This player bets and raises at an extremely high frequency regardless of their hand strength. They have a high continuation bet percentage, 3-bet frequently, and apply pressure on multiple streets. The key insight about this player is that their aggression is not connected to hand strength. It is a default mode, which means the correct counter is not to fold more, it is to call more and raise more because their range is wide and weak. The second type is the positional aggressor. This player is dangerous specifically when they are in position and suddenly becomes passive out of position. They are disciplined and patient until they have the advantage of acting last, and then they apply relentless pressure. The counter here is to trap them by checking strong hands more frequently when out of position and allowing them to build the pot for you. The third type is the exploitative aggressor. This is the most dangerous player at the table. They have studied your tendencies specifically. They know which situations make you fold. They know your bet sizing tells. They know your check means weakness most of the time. This player requires the most sophisticated response, which we are going to cover in depth shortly. The fourth type is the emotional aggressor. This player becomes aggressive after winning big pots or after taking beats. Their aggression is driven by emotion, not strategy. The counter is simple: patience and hand selection. Wait for a premium spot and extract maximum value when they are in their elevated emotional state. They will pay you off at a frequency that defies logic. Identifying which type you are facing within the first orbit changes every decision you make for the entire session. It is the difference between defending correctly and defending blindly. Now I want to give you something that most poker players will never hear in any training content anywhere. And I want you to pay close attention because this single concept has the potential to completely transform how aggressive players perceive you at the table. The concept is called strategic unpredictability engineering, and it comes directly from military game theory. In competitive conflict, the most dangerous opponent is not the strongest one. It is the one whose next move cannot be predicted with confidence. When an enemy cannot predict your response with confidence, every aggressive action they take carries uncertainty. And uncertainty is the enemy of aggression. Aggressive players attack because they believe the outcome is predictable. Remove that predictability, and you remove their incentive to attack. In poker, strategic unpredictability engineering works through what researchers call mixed strategy implementation, with deliberate deviation signals. In simple language, it means you occasionally do the opposite of what your range suggests, not randomly, but with purpose, to create permanent uncertainty in the minds of opponents who have been studying you. Here is a specific example. You have been check-folding to continuation bets on dry boards throughout a session. Your opponent has noticed and is now betting every flop you check. On the next dry board where you check, instead of folding to their continuation bet, you check raise with a medium strength hand, or even a complete bluff. You do not need to win this pot. You need this specific opponent to update their model of you. From this moment forward, every time they consider a continuation bet against you, there will be a question mark. That question mark costs them expected value on every single future street. This is the counterattack system that transforms you from a target into a threat. Not through aggression alone, but through the deliberate injection of doubt into the model your opponents have built about you. And once doubt is in that model, it stays there for the entire session. Let me stop here for a moment, because I want to give you access to the complete system behind everything in this video. Everything we have covered so far, the Defender's Matrix, table image engineering, strategic unpredictability, these are frameworks. And frameworks need protocols to become real skills. The Collection 2 ebooks take every concept in this video and expand it into step-by-step protocols with hand examples, decision trees, and session-by-session implementation guides. 10 ebooks plus 5 premium bonus ebooks, $29.89 for the complete system. Not for information, for transformation. The link is in the pinned comment below, And before we go deeper, one more thing. I recently partnered with Phenom Poker, a player-owned poker platform backed by Victor Blom, Brian Rast, and Daniel Cates. Sign up through my link in the pinned comment or scan the QR code on screen. Make your first deposit. Email me at junior.plakas@outlook.com with a screenshot of your deposit, and I will send you Collection 1, 10 complete ebooks, completely free. No forms, no purchase, just deposit and email me. The QR code is on screen right now. Now let's keep going, because what comes next is the most advanced part of this entire video. Here is something that happened at a World Series of Poker final table that perfectly illustrates the power of what we are building. A player had been folding to 3-bets all day. His opponents had mapped this pattern and were 3-betting him with increasing frequency, picking up his blinds and antes at will. Then, in a critical spot on the money bubble, with the entire table watching, he 4-bet shoved over a 3-bet with a hand that was far outside what anyone expected him to play that way. He did not win the hand, but what happened in the 30 hands after that completely changed the tournament. His opponents stopped 3-betting him light. They stopped stealing his blinds. They stopped applying automatic pressure, because he had broken the pattern at the exact moment it mattered most, and the psychological impact lasted far longer than the chips he won or lost in that specific hand. This illustrates what behavioral scientists call pattern interruption as a competitive tool. When you break a pattern that opponents have been relying on, the disruption is disproportionate to the cost of breaking it. Your opponents do not just update their model for that one spot. They update it globally. They now treat every interaction with you as potentially unpredictable. And that global uncertainty is worth far more than the individual pot. Here is how to implement pattern interruption strategically. You need to identify your own patterns first. What do you do consistently in specific situations? Do you always continuation bet on dry boards? Do you always check raise with your strongest hands, but never with medium hands? Do you always fold to river bets when you only have one pair? Write these patterns down. They are the map your opponents are using to extract chips from you. Now choose one pattern per session to interrupt deliberately, not randomly. Choose the moment when the interruption will have maximum psychological impact. When the opponent who has been exploiting that pattern most aggressively is watching. When the pot is significant enough that the action will be remembered. When the board texture makes your play genuinely confusing. Execute the interruption with absolute calm and confidence, regardless of the outcome. Then return to your normal game and watch your opponent's behavior change. Now let us talk about the most underused weapon in defensive poker, the check raise. Most players treat the check raise as a power move reserved for monster hands. Elite players treat it as a communication tool that sends one message above all others. I am not safe to bet into. Understanding the check raise as a communication tool rather than just a hand strength indicator transforms how you use it and multiplies its effectiveness dramatically. Here is the science behind why the check raise is so psychologically powerful. Research on competitive decision-making shows that unexpected aggressive responses to aggression trigger what psychologists call threat reappraisal in the brain of the aggressor. When someone who appeared passive suddenly becomes aggressive, the brain of the attacker goes through a rapid recalculation that involves significantly more cognitive load than a standard decision. That additional cognitive load degrades the quality of their response. They make worse decisions under the pressure of your unexpected aggression than they would make in a standard situation where they initiated the action. The check raise frequency that most recreational players use is between 3 and 8%. Elite players who have studied optimal defense maintain a check raise frequency between 15 and 25% in the spots where it is strategically warranted. That difference in frequency alone changes the entire dynamic of how opponents approach betting against you. When you check raise 5% of the time, opponents correctly calculate that you have a very strong hand almost every time you do it. When you check raise 20% of the time, including some medium hands and semi-bluffs, opponents cannot fold profitably to your check raises and cannot call profitably either. You have created a genuine dilemma, and genuine dilemmas extract chips regardless of the outcome of any individual hand. Here's the 3-step check-raise system. First, identify the opponent who is betting into you most frequently and most automatically. Second, wait for a board texture where a check-raise tells a plausible story given the range you would realistically have in that spot. Third, execute the check-raise with a sizing that creates maximum pressure, typically between 2.5 and 3 times the original bet. You do not need to have the best hand. You need to have the right story. The chips follow the story. Let us go even deeper, because everything we have covered so far is about what you do at the table. But the most advanced layer of stopping being a target happens before you sit down. It happens in how you prepare your mind for the specific type of pressure you are going to face. Sports psychologist Jim Loehr spent decades working with elite tennis players, boxers, and military personnel on what he called the ideal performance state. His research showed that performers who entered competitive environments in a predetermined psychological state of controlled aggression outperformed those who entered in a reactive or defensive mindset by a measurable margin in every domain studied. Controlled aggression is not anger. It is not nervousness. It is a specific mental state characterized by calm confidence in your own capability, readiness to respond to unexpected situations without hesitation, and complete absence of fear about what your opponent might do. In poker, entering every session in a state of controlled aggression transforms your table image before you play a single hand. The way you sit, the way you handle your chips, the pace at which you make decisions, the absence of visible reaction to bad outcomes. These are all signals that experienced opponents read immediately. A player who arrives at the table in controlled aggression mode radiates competence and unpredictability even before acting. And opponents who sense this competence will naturally select softer targets when choosing whom to attack. Here is the pre-session protocol that builds this state. 15 minutes before any session, you do 3 things. First, you review your defender's matrix and identify the specific counter strategies you will use against each of the 4 aggressor types. You choose one pattern from your previous session that you will deliberately interrupt in this session. Third, you set one mental intention for how you will respond to the first aggressive action directed at you. Not with a specific play, but with a psychological state. Calm, unhurried, and interested rather than threatened. When the first aggressive action comes, and it will come, you respond from that state. Not from fear, not from anger, but from the position of someone who has been waiting for exactly this opportunity. We are close to the end, and I want to give you the complete picture of what you are actually building when you implement everything in this video. Because this is bigger than defending against aggressive players. This is about becoming the kind of player who other players think about before the session starts. There is a phenomenon in competitive environments called reputation asymmetry. It was documented by behavioral economists studying financial markets and competitive sports, and it applies directly to poker. Reputation asymmetry means that a player with a reputation for being dangerous extracts value from that reputation in every hand, even the ones they never play. When opponents fold to your raises, part of what they are folding to is not your current hand, but their accumulated uncertainty about what you might have and what you might do. That accumulated uncertainty is a real financial asset. It has real dollar value that shows up in your results over time. And it is built through exactly the behaviors we covered in this video. Pattern interruption, strategic unpredictability, check-raise frequency, controlled aggression, table image engineering. Here is how the complete system works together. You arrive at the table in a controlled aggression state. In the first 7 hands, you broadcast competence and unpredictability through your bet sizing, timing, and reactions. You deploy the defender's matrix to identify the aggressor types you are facing. You implement one deliberate pattern interruption at the highest impact moment. You maintain your check-raise frequency above the threshold that creates genuine dilemmas for opponents. And you do all of this from a foundation of process-oriented thinking, where each decision is evaluated on its quality, not its outcome. The result is not just that you stop being a target. The result is that you become the player other players do not want to be in pots with. The player they check to. The player they 3-bet less frequently because the expected value of attacking you is lower than attacking someone else. And when you are systematically avoided as a target, the fish, the recreational players, the money in the game flows toward you naturally because you are the path of least resistance for chips moving away from the dangerous players. Here is where I leave you. And I want these words to stay with you long after this video ends. Every time you have felt like a target at a poker table, every time an aggressive player seemed to find you with uncanny accuracy, every time you felt like you could not defend no matter what you tried, you were not experiencing bad luck. You were experiencing the result of patterns you did not know you were broadcasting, signals you did not know you were sending, and a table image you did not know you were projecting. None of that was permanent, none of it was inevitable, and none of it defines the player you are going to be from this session forward. The system you learned today, the defender's matrix, table image engineering, strategic unpredictability, pattern interruption, check raise as communication, controlled aggression, reputation asymmetry, these are not advanced concepts reserved for professional players. They are the natural next step for any player who is serious about removing themselves as a target and installing themselves as a threat. They work at any stake, they work in any game, they work against any type of opponent, because they are built on universal principles of human psychology and competitive dynamics that apply everywhere people compete under pressure. You now know things that most players at your table will never know, not because they are not intelligent, but because they are studying the cards and you are studying the game above the cards. That is the difference that this channel exists to create. The complete implementation system, every protocol, every decision tree, every session-by-session guide for everything covered in this video, and 9 other frameworks exactly like it, is inside Collection 2. 10 ebooks and 5 premium bonus ebooks, $29.89. Not for content, for the complete transformation from target to threat. The link is in the pinned comment. Click it now while this is fresh. And if you want to play poker online with a real edge, join Phenom Poker through the link in the pinned comment, or scan the QR code on screen right now. Make your first deposit, email me at junior.placas@outlook.com with a screenshot, and I will personally send you Collection 1, 10 complete ebooks, completely free. No catch, no forms, just deposit, email me, and get instant access. And the books are yours immediately. Subscribe to this channel right now if this video gave you something real. Every single week, we go deeper into the intersection of neuroscience, psychology, philosophy, and tournament poker. Not to entertain you, to make you genuinely harder to beat. The players who find this channel and stay are building something that the targets at their tables will never understand. A game that fights back. A mind that doesn't break under pressure. A reputation that precedes them at every table they ever sit at. Share this video with one player who has been feeling like a target, not for the views, because you know someone who deserves to stop being picked on and start being feared. You came into this video as a target. You are leaving as something else entirely. See you in the next class.